Welcome to the world of daily life stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy listening. The calm before the storm. The airport buzzed with the typical commotion of travelers navigating check-in counters, security lines, and departure gates. Amid the flurry of activity, Lana Harper walked with a quiet elegance that turned heads without effort. Her presence was magnetic, composed, deliberate, and confident. She wore a tailored emerald green pantsuit that complemented her radiant brown skin, her natural curls framing her face like a crown. With a leather carry-on in one hand and a slim briefcase in the other, she moved through the terminal with the grace of someone who belonged, wherever she chose to be. Lana was no stranger to air travel. As a senior consultant for a global firm specializing in sustainable development, her work often required her to crisscross continents. This trip was particularly significant, a presentation to key stakeholders on groundbreaking initiatives she had spearheaded. It was the culmination of months of research and planning, a moment to showcase her expertise and vision. Approaching the gate, she exchanged a polite smile with the attendant scanning boarding passes. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Harper," the young woman said, her tone reflecting the respect Lana's demeanor commanded. With a quick scan, Lana was ushered onto the jet bridge leading to the aircraft. Stepping into the plane, Lana was greeted by a chorus of polished smiles from the cabin crew. "Good morning, Clara Thompson," the lead flight attendant said with professional warmth. Clara had been with the airline for over a decade, earning a reputation for her efficiency and charm. But as her eyes landed on Lana, something flickered in her expression, something she quickly masked. "Good morning," Lana replied, her voice calm and measured. She glanced down at her boarding pass, seat 2A, first class. She walked down the narrow aisle, her heels clicking softly on the carpet. As she reached her seat, she placed her carry-on in the overhead bin with practiced ease. Settling into the wide leather seat by the window, Lana exhaled a soft sigh of contentment. The sunlight streaming through the oval window illuminated her features, casting a warm glow on her face. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a leather-bound notebook, flipping it open to a page filled with meticulous notes. Lana had a ritual for every flight: review her plans, refine her ideas, and focus her mind. As her pen moved across the page, crafting key points for her presentation, she felt the hum of the plane as passengers shuffled to their seats around her. Clara moved through the first-class cabin, assisting other passengers and ensuring everything was in order. But her gaze kept drifting toward Lana. Something about this woman unsettled her. It wasn't Lana's confident air or her polished appearance. Clara had served countless influential and affluent passengers over the years. No, it was the way Lana carried herself, with a quiet assurance that seemed to challenge unspoken norms. "May I see your boarding pass, please?" Clara's voice broke through Lana's focus. Lana looked up, her eyes meeting Clara's. She offered a polite smile and handed over her digital boarding pass. Clara scanned it, her eyes lingering on the screen a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you, Ms. Harper," Clara said, handing it back. Her tone was neutral, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "You're welcome," Lana replied, her gaze steady. She returned to her notebook, dismissing the moment as a routine check. Clara moved on, but unease lingered in her chest. She couldn't quite pinpoint why. Lana didn't fit the usual first-class profile in Clara's mind, a bias she hadn't examined until now. She busied herself with pre-flight preparations, but the thought persisted like a splinter in her mind. As the flight crew completed their final checks, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing their imminent departure. The plane's engines roared to life, and the cabin lights dimmed for takeoff. Lana closed her notebook, gazing out of the window as the runway stretched out ahead. She was accustomed to challenges, both subtle and overt. But she didn't know that this flight would be one of the most defining moments of her life, a journey that would test her patience, dignity, and resilience. Clara walked through the aisle once more, casting another glance at Lana. For reasons she couldn't explain, she felt compelled to act. As the plane ascended into the sky, Clara made a decision that would set events into motion, events that would leave everyone on board stunned. The hum of the engines had settled into a steady rhythm as the plane leveled off at cruising altitude. Passengers began to relax, some reclining their seats, others opening laptops or flipping through magazines. The first-class cabin exuded an air of quiet luxury, with plush seats, crisp linens on fold-out trays, and glasses of champagne or sparkling water gracing each table. Lana Harper, however, remained focused on her work. Her pen glided over the pages of her leather-bound notebook as she fine-tuned her presentation, unaware that she had become the focus of a growing tension. Clara Thompson, the lead flight attendant, stood at the front of the first-class cabin, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the unease that had settled in her chest since she first saw Lana. It wasn't Lana's appearance, though she couldn't deny it was striking. The way her emerald suit complemented her rich brown skin and her natural curls framed her face with effortless elegance. No, it was something deeper, something that challenged Clara's ingrained notions of who belonged in first class. Lana's calm confidence, her lack of need to prove herself, unnerved Clara in ways she didn't fully understand. It made her question her assumptions, and that discomfort manifested as doubt, a doubt she now felt compelled to act upon. Clara approached one of the junior flight attendants, a fresh-faced young woman named Jessica, who was pouring coffee for a passenger. "Jessica, can I have a word?" Clara's voice was low but firm. Jessica glanced up, nodding quickly, and followed Clara to the small galley at the front of the cabin. "What's going on?" Jessica asked, sensing the tension in Clara's demeanor. Clara hesitated, glancing toward Lana's seat as if to confirm she was still there. "There's a passenger in 2A. Her name is Lana Harper," Clara began, her tone measured. "Something about her doesn't sit right with me. I think there might have been a mistake with her booking." Jessica frowned, confused. "A mistake? What kind of mistake?" "Her boarding pass was scanned and verified, wasn't it?" "Yes," Clara admitted, her voice tinged with frustration. "But I just have a feeling something's off. I'm going to check the system again to make sure everything is in order." Jessica nodded hesitantly, though her expression betrayed her uncertainty. Clara's reputation for professionalism preceded her, but this seemed unusual. Still, she didn't question further and returned to her duties while Clara accessed the tablet containing the passenger manifest. She scrolled through the list until she found Lana Harper's name, confirming her seat assignment and ticket status. Everything was in order, just as it had been when Lana boarded the plane. Yet Clara couldn't let it go. She looked up from the tablet, her gaze once again falling on Lana. The woman sat peacefully in her seat, her pen moving rhythmically across the page. She exuded an aura of focus and determination, oblivious to the scrutiny she was under. Clara clenched her jaw, her internal conflict intensifying. She had no concrete reason to doubt Lana's place in first class, but the feeling gnawed at her, fueled by biases she had never examined. After a moment, Clara made her decision. She walked down the aisle with purpose, her polished shoes clicking softly on the carpeted floor. As she approached Lana's seat, she paused, taking a deep breath to steady herself. The passengers in nearby seats glanced up, sensing the tension in her movements. "Ms. Harper," Clara said, her voice calm but firm. Lana looked up from her notebook, her expression neutral but attentive. "Yes?" Lana replied, setting her pen down and meeting Clara's gaze with calm composure. Clara hesitated, the weight of her actions pressing on her. "I need to speak with you regarding your seat," she said, keeping her tone professional. "There appears to have been an issue with the booking, and I'll need to ask you to relocate to the economy cabin." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Nearby passengers exchanged confused glances, their murmurs filling the otherwise quiet cabin. Lana's expression didn't waver, but her eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of disbelief crossing her face. "I'm sorry, there must be some mistake," Lana said, her voice steady but firm. "I booked this seat weeks ago, and my boarding pass was verified when I boarded the plane." "I understand," Clara said, though her tone lacked conviction. "But the system shows an error, and we need to address it. This is just a temporary measure, and I assure you it will be resolved as soon as possible." Lana's gaze didn't falter. She had faced situations like this before, subtle acts of discrimination disguised as procedural errors or misunderstandings. Her years of experience navigating these moments had taught her how to remain composed, even when indignation threatened to surface. "I see," Lana said after a moment. "Then I'd like a written explanation from the airline regarding this error." Clara stiffened, caught off guard by Lana's calm but assertive response. "I'm afraid I can't provide that right now, but I assure you it will be addressed." Lana smiled faintly, though the warmth didn't reach her eyes. "In that case, I'd like to speak with a supervisor or the captain. If there's truly an issue with my seat, I'd like it resolved before I'm asked to move." The nearby passengers, who had been watching the exchange with growing interest, now seemed fully engaged. A man in a suit leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Is everything all right?" he asked, addressing no one in particular. Clara felt the weight of their stares, her confidence beginning to waver. She had expected compliance, not resistance, especially not in such a measured and logical manner. "I'm sorry, Ms. Harper, but I must insist. If you refuse to cooperate, I'll have no choice but to involve security." Lana's faint smile faded. She looked around the cabin, taking in the faces of the passengers who were now watching her intently. Some looked sympathetic, others uncomfortable. Turning back to Clara, she spoke with quiet authority. "Very well," Lana said, rising from her seat with a grace that belied the tension in the air. "If this is the airline's policy, I'll comply. But rest assured, I'll be following up on this matter." Clara exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding as Lana retrieved her carry-on from the overhead bin. The cabin was silent except for the soft rustle of Lana's movements and the faint hum of the engines. As she stepped into the aisle, Lana straightened her shoulders, her head held high. Her composure was unshaken, her dignity intact. Clara escorted her to the economy cabin, where the contrast in accommodations was stark. The cramped seats and fluorescent lighting were a far cry from the spacious luxury of first class. Lana was directed to a middle seat near the back of the plane, wedged between a man engrossed in his tablet and a young woman with a fidgeting toddler. "Here you are, Ms. Harper," Clara said, her tone now brisk, as if eager to end the interaction. "Thank you," Lana replied evenly, setting her bag under the seat in front of her and sitting down without further comment. As Clara walked away, relief mingled with an unspoken unease. She had resolved the situation, or so she thought. What Clara didn't realize was that Lana Harper was not a woman who allowed injustice to go unchecked. While outwardly calm, Lana's mind was already working, strategizing her next steps. This wasn't the first time she had faced bias, but it would be one of the last times she allowed it to go unchallenged. Lana reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, typing a quick message to her assistant. "There's been an incident. Contact the airline's PR team. Also, prepare to escalate to the press if necessary." She put her phone away and leaned back in her seat, her expression calm but resolute. The humiliation she had just endured would not be forgotten, nor would it be ignored. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was standing against the quiet, insidious prejudice that too often went unspoken and unchallenged. As the plane continued its journey, the atmosphere in both the economy and first-class cabins remained tense. Passengers whispered among themselves, the story of what had just transpired spreading like wildfire. Lana, meanwhile, remained composed, her mind focused on the bigger picture. She knew that what happened next would not only define her response but also set an example for countless others who had faced similar injustices. What Clara didn't know, what none of the passengers or crew knew, was that Lana Harper's quiet resolve was a force to be reckoned with. By the time the plane landed, the ripple effects of this incident would extend far beyond the confines of the aircraft, igniting a conversation that would challenge the very foundation of the airline's policies and practices. This was only the beginning. The plane soared steadily through the sky, its engines humming in a rhythmic lull. But inside the cabin, a storm brewed, a storm that most passengers weren't fully aware of yet. Lana Harper sat in her cramped economy seat, her shoulders squared and her expression calm, though her mind was anything but. The humiliation she had just experienced still echoed in her thoughts, not as a moment of defeat, but as a spark igniting a fire within her. She had endured indignities before, subtle and overt, but this time felt different. This time, she wasn't just a passive observer of injustice. She was a witness, a victim, and soon, a catalyst for change. The young woman sitting next to her, a mother juggling a restless toddler, cast sympathetic glances at Lana. She'd witnessed the entire interaction from afar, and though she hadn't spoken up, guilt now lingered in her expression. Finally, she leaned closer, her voice low and hesitant. "I'm sorry for what they did to you," she said, her words barely audible over the hum of the engines. "It wasn't right." Lana turned to her, offering a small, polite smile. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice steady. She appreciated the sentiment but wasn't seeking sympathy. Sympathy wouldn't change the situation. Action would. The toddler reached for Lana's notebook, his tiny fingers brushing against the leather cover. Lana chuckled softly and handed the child a pen cap to play with, giving the mother a moment of relief. The interaction, brief and human, grounded Lana amidst the whirlwind of thoughts swirling in her mind. A few rows ahead, another economy passenger, a man in his 30s dressed in a casual sweater and jeans, adjusted his seat to glance back at Lana. He had seen her removed from first class and escorted to the economy section, and the quiet strength she exuded intrigued him. Without realizing it, Lana had begun to draw the attention and silent support of those around her. Meanwhile, back in the first-class cabin, Clara Thompson continued her duties, but unease tugged at her composure. She tried to convince herself that she had done the right thing, that she had acted in accordance with protocol. Yet the memory of Lana's piercing gaze, her calm yet firm words, lingered in Clara's mind. She could still hear the subtle weight in Lana's voice when she'd said, "I'll comply, but rest assured, I'll be following up on this matter." Clara shook her head, attempting to dismiss the nagging doubt. She had done her job, hadn't she? And yet, she couldn't ignore the growing whispers among the passengers. The man in seat 3C, a regular first-class traveler and an influential blogger, had been particularly vocal about the incident, loudly questioning what had just transpired. "That woman had every right to be here," he muttered to his seatmate, shaking his head. "I've seen people get bumped before, but this? Something feels off." Clara overheard him, her cheeks flushing. She considered addressing the comment but decided against it. The last thing she needed was to escalate the situation further. Still, the murmurs around her grew, a quiet but insistent reminder that her actions hadn't gone unnoticed. As the flight continued, Lana's assistant, Veronica, received her message on the ground. Veronica was no stranger to Lana's ability to turn adversity into opportunity, but even she felt a pang of anger as she read the words, "Incident on the flight. Prep media contacts and draft a letter to the airline's execs. Details to follow." Veronica didn't hesitate. She began pulling together a list of journalists, editors, and contacts within the airline industry. She knew Lana wouldn't let this slide, and she also knew the power of Lana's platform. Lana wasn't just a corporate consultant, she was a thought leader, a speaker, and a fierce advocate for equity and justice. If this situation became public, it wouldn't just be a story. It would be a movement. Up in the cockpit, the captain received a call from the flight attendants. Clara had reported the seating error as part of her duties, framing it as a routine issue. But the captain, a seasoned professional with decades of experience, raised an eyebrow as he reviewed the report. Something about the situation didn't sit right with him. He had seen passengers moved for various reasons over the years, but this one felt different. He made a mental note to follow up after the flight landed. Back in the economy cabin, Lana took out her phone again, discreetly typing another message while the plane's Wi-Fi connection allowed her limited access. This time, she reached out to a close friend and colleague, Julia Martinez, a prominent civil rights attorney. "Need advice. Potential discrimination case. Details later." Julia's reply came almost immediately, understood. Document everything. Witnesses? Lana glanced around the cabin, noting the passengers who had been watching her earlier. She made mental notes of their faces, knowing that even the smallest observation could become critical later. The hours passed slowly. The discomfort of the economy seat, the stark contrast to the first-class experience she had paid for, was a constant reminder of the indignity she had endured. But Lana's resolve only strengthened. She wasn't just angry, she was focused. When the plane began its descent, the mood in the cabin shifted. Passengers prepared for landing, buckling seatbelts and stowing away personal items. Lana remained calm, her hands resting on her notebook. She had spent the flight drafting a detailed account of the incident, documenting every word, every action, every nuance. As the plane touched down and taxied to the gate, Clara allowed herself a moment of relief. The situation, as far as she was concerned, had been managed. But her relief was short-lived. As the passengers disembarked, Lana was among the last to leave the plane. She walked calmly down the aisle, her head held high, her posture exuding a quiet strength. When she reached the front of the plane, she paused, turning to Clara. "Thank you for your service," Lana said, her tone polite but firm. "I'll be contacting the airline regarding this matter. Have a good day." Clara opened her mouth to respond but found herself at a loss for words. The weight of Lana's calm statement hung in the air long after she had exited the plane. In the terminal, Lana wasted no time. She made a beeline for the airline's customer service desk, where she calmly requested to speak with a supervisor. The young attendant behind the desk hesitated, sensing the gravity of Lana's demeanor, and quickly complied. The supervisor, a middle-aged man named Robert, arrived within minutes. He introduced himself, his expression professional but wary. "Ms. Harper, I understand you'd like to discuss an issue?" "Yes," Lana said, her voice steady. "I was removed from my first-class seat during the flight due to what the lead flight attendant claimed was a seating error. I believe this incident warrants further investigation, as I suspect it was not a procedural mistake but rather an act of bias." Robert blinked, caught off guard by Lana's directness. "I see. I assure you, we take these matters very seriously. Let me gather more details." "I've already documented the incident," Lana said, handing him a typed summary she had printed at the terminal's business center. "I'd also like the contact information for your corporate office. This will not be the last conversation we have on this matter." Robert glanced at the document, his expression growing more serious with each passing second. "I understand," he said finally. "I'll ensure this is escalated to the appropriate channels." As Lana walked away from the desk, she felt the weight of the day beginning to lift. She knew the battle was far from over, but she also knew she was prepared. This wasn't just about her seat on a plane. It was about the countless others who had faced similar indignities and lacked the resources or platform to fight back. Lana was determined to make sure their voices were heard. By the time she reached the car waiting to take her to her hotel, her phone buzzed with messages. Veronica had drafted a letter to the airline's executives, Julia had connected her with additional legal resources, and a journalist from a major news outlet had expressed interest in the story. Lana smiled faintly as she read the messages, her resolve solidifying. This wasn't the end of the journey. It was only the beginning. Lana Harper stepped into the black sedan waiting for her outside the airport, the weight of the day pressing down on her shoulders but failing to break her resolve. The driver, a kind-eyed man in his late 50s, offered a polite greeting before starting the car. She acknowledged him with a nod, her focus already shifting to her phone. Messages and emails flooded her inbox, a testament to how quickly news of the incident was spreading. Her assistant, Veronica, had been efficient as always. The draft of a formal complaint to the airline's executives was sitting in her inbox, along with a list of media contacts who were ready to take up the story. Julia, her attorney friend, had already outlined a legal strategy should the airline fail to address the matter adequately. Lana skimmed through the updates, her mind calculating the next steps with precision. The drive to her hotel was uneventful, but her thoughts were anything but. She replayed the incident on the plane, analyzing every detail, every word exchanged, and every glance she had caught from the other passengers. Her years of experience in corporate strategy had taught her to view challenges not as obstacles, but as opportunities to effect change. This was no different. The humiliation she had endured was not an isolated incident, it was a symptom of a deeper problem, one that she was determined to confront. By the time the car pulled up to the grand entrance of her hotel, Lana had formulated a clear plan. She stepped out of the vehicle, her emerald green suit still immaculate despite the long journey, and strode into the lobby with the same quiet confidence that had unsettled Clara Thompson hours earlier. The concierge greeted her warmly, and within minutes, she was in her suite, the city skyline stretching out before her through floor-to-ceiling windows. Lana didn't waste time. She set up her laptop at the desk, pulled out her notebook, and began drafting a detailed timeline of events. Every interaction, every word spoken, every nuance of Clara's demeanor was meticulously recorded. She supplemented her notes with messages and emails she had sent and received during the flight, building a comprehensive narrative that left no room for ambiguity. As she worked, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Julia. "Lana," Julia began, her voice steady but laced with urgency, "I've reviewed the initial details you sent me. This isn't just about a seating dispute, it's a clear case of bias. We have a strong foundation to pursue legal action if the airline doesn't handle this appropriately." "I agree," Lana replied, her tone calm but firm. "But this isn't just about me, Julia. This is about the broader issue. How many others have experienced something similar but didn't have the means or the platform to fight back? I want this to spark a conversation, not just resolve my individual case." Julia was silent for a moment, then said, "That's why you're different, Lana. Most people would focus solely on their own grievance, but you're looking at the bigger picture. Let's use that to our advantage. The media interest is already building, and public pressure can be a powerful tool." "I've already spoken to Veronica about that," Lana said. "She's coordinating with a few journalists we trust to ensure the story is told accurately and responsibly. But before we go public, I want to give the airline a chance to respond. I'll be sending a formal complaint tonight." "Good," Julia said. "Keep me updated. And Lana, don't underestimate the impact you're about to make." After ending the call, Lana turned her attention back to her laptop. She reviewed Veronica's draft complaint, refining the language to ensure it was both professional and unyielding. The letter outlined the events of the flight, emphasized the discriminatory undertones of Clara's actions, and demanded a thorough investigation. Lana made it clear that she expected not just an apology, but systemic changes to prevent similar incidents in the future. By the time she hit send, it was nearly midnight. Lana leaned back in her chair, exhaustion creeping in but unable to dampen her determination. She glanced at her phone, noting the time. The conference she was in town for would begin in less than 12 hours, but she knew she wouldn't be able to rest until this matter was set in motion. The next morning, Lana arrived at the conference looking as composed as ever, despite the sleepless night. Her presentation was scheduled for the afternoon, giving her a few hours to navigate the whirlwind of attention her complaint had already generated. By the time she checked her email, the airline's corporate office had responded, acknowledging receipt of her letter and promising to investigate the matter thoroughly. Lana wasn't convinced by their initial response, but she knew it was only the beginning. The media had already picked up the story, and headlines such as "Prominent Consultant Removed from First Class in Suspected Act of Bias" were making the rounds on social media. Her inbox was flooded with messages of support, as well as stories from others who had faced similar treatment. Each message strengthened her resolve, reminding her that this fight was bigger than herself. During a break between sessions, Lana received a call from one of the airline's senior executives. The man's tone was polite, even apologetic, but Lana detected a note of defensiveness beneath his words. "Ms. Harper," he began, "I want to personally apologize for the inconvenience you experienced on your flight. We take these matters very seriously and are conducting a thorough investigation. I appreciate the apology, Lana replied, her tone measured. But I hope you understand this is about more than just inconvenience. This is about the culture within your organization that allowed such an incident to occur. I'm not interested in platitudes. I'm interested in action. The executive hesitated before replying, we understand your concerns, and we're committed to addressing them. I'd like to invite you to meet with our leadership team to discuss this further. We value your feedback and want to ensure this doesn't happen again. Lana agreed to the meeting, though she remained cautious. She knew the airline's primary concern was likely damage control, but she was determined to push for meaningful change. After ending the call, she made a note to inform Julia and Veronica, knowing their input would be invaluable in preparing for the discussion. The hours leading up to her presentation flew by. Despite the distractions, Lana delivered her talk with the same poise and confidence that defined her. The audience hung on her every word as she outlined her vision for sustainable business practices, her passion shining through every point she made. By the time she finished, the room erupted in applause, a standing ovation underscoring the impact of her message. As the conference wound down, Lana's focus shifted back to the unfolding situation with the airline. The meeting with their leadership team was scheduled for the following week, giving her time to prepare. In the meantime, she continued to engage with the media, sharing her story not to seek personal vindication but to shed light on a pervasive issue. The days that followed were a whirlwind of interviews, strategy sessions, and countless emails. Lana's story had struck a chord, sparking a national conversation about bias in customer service and the subtle ways discrimination could manifest in everyday interactions. Activists, industry leaders, and ordinary individuals alike joined the discussion, amplifying the message Lana had worked so hard to convey. When the day of the meeting arrived, Lana walked into the airline's headquarters with her head held high. Flanked by Julia and Veronica, she exuded the same quiet strength that had carried her through the initial incident. The executives she met with were cordial, even deferential, but Lana wasn't swayed by their polished words. She presented her case with clarity and conviction, outlining not only her personal experience but the broader implications of their policies and practices. By the end of the meeting, the airline had committed to a series of measures, including mandatory bias training for their staff, a review of their seating protocols, and the establishment of a task force to address diversity and inclusion within their organization. Lana left the meeting knowing the fight wasn't over, but she also knew she had made a difference. As she walked out of the building, sunlight streaming through the glass doors, Lana allowed herself a small smile. The journey had been exhausting, frustrating, and at times deeply painful, but it had also been worth it. She had turned humiliation into a catalyst for change, not just for herself, but for countless others who had faced similar struggles. And in doing so, she had proven once again that dignity and resilience were the most powerful tools of all. The weeks that followed Lana Harper's meeting with the airline's executives were a whirlwind of transformation, not just for the airline, but for the broader discourse surrounding bias and discrimination in everyday experiences. The incident had become a national story, and Lana found herself at the center of a movement she hadn't anticipated but fully embraced. Her calm dignity during the ordeal had struck a chord with people from all walks of life, turning her into a symbol of resilience and justice. The airline, for its part, had begun to take visible steps to address the fallout. They announced a comprehensive review of their training programs, focusing on unconscious bias and equitable treatment of all passengers. Publicly, they committed to creating an inclusive travel environment, even going so far as to establish a partnership with civil rights organizations to ensure accountability. For many, these actions were seen as a step in the right direction, but Lana knew this was only the beginning. Real change required persistence, and she was prepared to hold them to their promises. In the days following the meeting, Lana's inbox overflowed with messages of support, gratitude, and shared stories of injustice. Some were from high-profile figures in the business and social justice sectors, offering collaboration and platforms to amplify the message. Others came from everyday people, teachers, students, travelers, sharing their own experiences of being dismissed, underestimated, or marginalized. Each story deepened Lana's resolve, reminding her why this fight mattered so much. one email stood out. It was from a woman named Monica, a single mother who had experienced a similar incident while traveling for a job interview. Monica wrote about how she'd been asked to leave her seat in first class without explanation, forced to endure a long flight in discomfort, and ultimately missed her interview because of the delay. "I didn't have the resources or the voice to fight back," Monica wrote. "But seeing you stand up for yourself and others gives me hope. Thank you." Lana read the email twice, her chest tightening with a mix of empathy and determination. Monica's story wasn't unique, it was one of countless others that often went unheard. Lana decided then that her efforts couldn't stop with this single victory. She had to do more. With the support of her assistant Veronica and her attorney friend Julia, Lana began laying the groundwork for a new initiative. She envisioned an organization that would advocate for fair treatment in customer service industries, provide resources for those who had been discriminated against, and work toward systemic change. She called it the Equity in Action Initiative. The launch of the initiative was met with overwhelming enthusiasm. Within days of its announcement, donations poured in, and partnerships with advocacy groups, corporate sponsors, and prominent activists were secured. The initiative's mission was clear: to create a world where dignity and fairness were the standard, not the exception. Lana knew it was an ambitious goal, but she also knew it was achievable with the right people and determination. As Lana worked tirelessly to build the initiative, her personal and professional life became increasingly intertwined. The corporate consulting world, once her sole focus, now seemed like just one part of a much larger purpose. Her reputation as a thought leader had grown exponentially, and she began receiving invitations to speak at conferences, universities, and corporate retreats about the importance of equity and inclusion. One such event took place at a major tech company's annual leadership summit. The audience was filled with CEOs, executives, and decision-makers from across the industry. Lana stood on the stage, her emerald green suit a subtle nod to the moment that had sparked this journey. Her voice was steady and powerful as she recounted her experience and challenged the audience to examine their own biases and practices. "This isn't just about what happened to me," Lana said, her gaze sweeping the room. "It's about what happens to millions of people every day, people who are judged not by their character or their abilities, but by stereotypes and assumptions. It's about creating a culture where everyone is treated with respect, no matter who they are or where they come from." The audience erupted in applause when she finished, but Lana didn't linger on the praise. She knew that words alone wouldn't bring about change. Action would. And that was exactly what she intended to inspire. Meanwhile, the airline's leadership team continued to grapple with the repercussions of the incident. Clara Thompson, the flight attendant whose actions had sparked the controversy, was undergoing her own journey of reflection. After the incident, she had been placed on administrative leave pending the investigation. Initially defensive, Clara had come to recognize the unconscious biases that had influenced her behavior. As part of her reinstatement, the airline required her to participate in extensive training on diversity and inclusion. One day, Clara reached out to Lana through the airline's mediation program. The message was brief but sincere: "I'd like to apologize in person, if you're willing. I've learned a lot since that day, and I'd like to share my perspective." Lana hesitated before responding. She had no obligation to meet with Clara, no responsibility to offer her closure. But Lana also believed in the power of dialogue and education. If this conversation could lead to greater understanding and growth, it was worth considering. The meeting took place in a neutral space, a conference room at the airline's headquarters. Clara looked nervous as she entered, her usually impeccable uniform replaced by casual attire. Lana greeted her with a polite nod, her expression unreadable. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," Clara began, her voice quiet but steady. "I want to start by saying how deeply sorry I am for what happened. I've spent a lot of time reflecting on my actions, and I realize now that I let my own biases cloud my judgment. It wasn't fair to you, and it wasn't right." Lana listened intently, her hands folded in her lap. When Clara finished, she took a moment before responding. "I appreciate your apology," Lana said. "Acknowledging bias is an important first step. but real change comes from what you do next. It's not enough to say the words, you have to live them. Clara nodded, her eyes earnest. I understand that. I've committed myself to learning and growing from this experience. I hope to use what I've learned to help others avoid making the same mistakes. Their conversation continued for nearly an hour, touching on topics of privilege, accountability, and the importance of systemic change. By the end, Clara left the room visibly humbled but also determined to make amends in her own way. Lana, for her part, felt a sense of closure, though she knew the work was far from over. Months turned into a year, and the ripple effects of Lana's journey continued to spread. The Equity in Action initiative had become a leading force for change, with programs that provided training, resources, and advocacy for marginalized communities. Lana's story had become a case study in corporate ethics courses, a reminder of the power of resilience and the importance of standing up against injustice. As Lana sat in her office one evening, reviewing the initiative's latest progress report, she allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. The path she had walked since that fateful flight had been challenging, but it had also been deeply fulfilling. She thought of Monica and the countless others who had shared their stories with her, and she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The world wasn't perfect, and there was still so much work to be done. But as Lana looked out at the city lights, she knew one thing for certain: change was possible, and she was proud to be a part of it. She closed her notebook, a faint smile on her lips, and prepared for the next chapter of the journey.